The first is from Nicolas Guillen, the poet from Cuba, Poeta Nacional. He died in 89, born in 1902. And this, I'm going to quote from his poem, Sabas, written, it comes from the collection West Indies Limited, which is dated 1934. It says, yo vi a Sabas, el negro sin veneno, pedir su pan de puerta en puerta. ¿Por qué Sabas la mano abierta? Este Sabas es un negro bueno. I saw Sabas, an innocuous Negro, begging his bread from door to door. Why the open hands, Sabas? This Sabas is a good Negro. Aunque te den el pan es poco, y menos ese pan de puerta en puerta. ¿Por qué Sabas la mano abierta? Este Sabas es un negro loco. Although they give you bread, bread is little, and even less this bread from door to door. Why the open hands, Sabas? This Sabas is a crazy negro. Yo vi a Sabas, el negro hirsuto, pedir por Dios para su muerta. ¿Por qué Sabas la mano abierta? Este Sabas es un negro bruto. I saw Sabas, the hairy, it's the Rasta type, man, asked for his bread, asked in God's name beg in God's name for his dead woman, his dead wife. Why is Sabas the open hand? This Sabas is a stupid Negro. And then he goes on to encourage Sabas to do something, to get up and take charge of the situation. And he ends up by saying, Sabas, caramba Sabas, no seas tan loco. Sabas, no seas tan bruto, ni tan bueno. Caramba Sabas. I'm going to give the polite translation now. At the end of the poem, I'll give the real translation. Caramba Sabas, don't be so crazy, don't be so stupid, don't be so good. And then the next one I want to quote is from Maloney's poem, from the book Street Smart. Well, Street Smart is the translation, but it's from the original Juega Vivo. It's called The Handler. Robert, take a good look at things. All your life you've handled buses, hammers, machines, lottery boards, racehorses, Coca-Cola cards, big and small saws, nets and shrimp shells, pick and shovel and mules on the canal, rakes in gardens, suitcases and send-offs in hotels. So much so that your weariness is now ages old. Once and for all, handle a weapon. And then the next is from Lovelace. Let me preface this by saying that normally I wouldn't use this kind of language, but your president in the last few weeks, I understand, used this language in public discourse, so I can use it. And I'm quoting from now from Earl Lovelace. In any case, I'm quoting Earl Lovelace. It's one of his characters declares. It's from the book. It's Just a Movie, his latest novel. I'm not fucking taking that. I'm not taking fucking that. That's Earl Lovelace. And you know the poetic device parallelism of members. You know also the versatile way in which that word is both adjective and adverb. So Earl Lovelace is clearly a great artist. And finally, from Garvey, but immortalized by Bob Marley, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Well, the trajectory, my title is 3 Decades of Pan-Caribbean Literary Theory. The trajectory of development of Pan-Caribbean literary theory begins, from my point of view, with my 1984 book. Indeed, it's my first book. It's published by Three Continents Press, called Central American Writers of West Indian Origin, a New Hispanic Literature. And it ends, for the time being, of course, with the first book of one of the most promising students I've had so far, a Panamanian from Darien, Albricio Mara Alpiano. She couldn't make it, she was supposed to come, but she couldn't make it. Her book is Bunde y Buyeringue, literatura oral popular de mi tierra Darien. Bunde and Buyeringue, popular oral literature from my native region Darien, published in 2010 by Original World Press. Now, this is a trajectory in the line of theory, but of theoretical analysis. But however, if we will look at the line of actual artistic products, the trajectory will go from Maloney's first book of poems, Juega Vivo, 1984, to the second edition of Juega Vivo, the second expanded edition of Juega Vivo, which was 2008. And along with that, there was a translation called Street Smart, published in the books of, there were two, there was other Bible, but both books emerged together. The second edition of Juega Vivo and the translation called Street Smart. The road from 1984 to now has been long, and if not winding, at least marked by intense and necessary complex discussion. Our presentation today will focus on as much of this complex discussion as we can in 30 minutes with a room full of people who have just eaten. I will start with chapter 6 of my 1984 book, The Conclusion. Its conclusion is called Towards a Pan-Caribbean Literature. It opens as follows. The preceding pages have attempted to demonstrate that a group of Central American authors of Anglophone Caribbean origin has begun to create a literature in Spanish that is essentially similar in form and content to all other Anglophone literature emanating from the Caribbean. It needs only to be reaffirmed in this concluding chapter that this similarity is based on an essential thread of homogeneity that runs through all Caribbean cultures and hence all Caribbean literary expressions. This homogeneity is what constitutes West Indianness in literature. It can be viewed as a context or an intellectual framework in which literature emanating from the region can best be appreciated and explained. Our preceding chapter of that book, that's chapter 5, for example, created such a context that was more than merely heuristic to explicate the new poetry produced by West Indians in Central America. And among the new poets was the young Gerardo. He was young then, I guess he's still young today. 3 decades ago, well, it was closer to 4 decades since my research on that book flows from my doctoral dissertation, which was completed in '75. We were speculating, establishing theoretical constructs, working with what you might call circumstantial evidence rather than the hard data. This will come later, the work with the hard data, with the hard facts, will come later through profound study of the African intellectual tradition and the African cultural tradition. I continue from chapter 6. In summary then, these various formulations all present a common Caribbean spirit or culture or Weltanschauung. The commonalities far outweighing the differences. Coulthard, that's J.R. Coulthard, and James C.L.R. James, explicitly, and Franklin Knight, by reference, have declared the common African heritage to be the most important source of West Indianness. Our own introductory presentations entirely endorse these views, in fact. In fact, our critical framework was premised on them. Our formulation, however, went one step further to the logical conclusion by including the rimland areas of the Caribbean Sea in the concept of Caribbean. Most importantly, we have demonstrated explicitly that a West Indian literature written in Spanish can and indeed does emanate from at least 2 rimland nations. That was Panama, Costa Rica. That was end of the quote from that 1984 book. And then 2 pages further on, I continue. Basing themselves on the dictum allegedly self-evident that the language makes the culture, the proponents of Euro-dominance have pointed with some degree of satisfaction to the indelibly fundamental impact made by European tribal differences on the languages of the Caribbean. Recent research in the field of Creolistics has, however, suggested an entirely different interpretation of the linguistic situation in the Caribbean. According to this more recent view, the real quote-unquote native languages of the Caribbean are not Spanish and French and English and Dutch, European languages, but the various creoles formed from a tribe-specific European lexicon, that is English, Spanish, French, Dutch, on the foundation of an African syntax that was not tribe-specific. Hence, the bases of these languages and their commonality are rooted in Africa, not in Europe. In Chapter 2, we saw that the linguistic situation that prevails among West Indians in Panama and Costa Rica is essentially representative of the entire region. Now, this is what I wrote in 84.